Hi everyone. A lot of people always ask me, what is the ideal time to go to Torment Difficulty? How do you progress? Well, first of all, I want to mention I already made like a 1 to 100 progression guide that covers the basics of, what you want to do and when and why. So if you haven't seen that yet, I recommend you to check that out. But specifically talking about the capstone dungeon and the transition from Nightmare difficulty to Torment, I have some tips for you here. So as you may know, I've been playing almost entirely hardcore so far. I've leveled a bunch of rogues, I've been having a lot of fun, and generally I try to progress to Torment difficulty quite early, regardless of that. So I've done the Fallen Temple capstone dungeon every time at around level 62 to level 63. There are some people that do it earlier. I wouldn't really recommend that on hardcore because it can be relatively tough. Every level that you are under-leveled compared to the monsters will increase your damage taken and reduce your damage done to them. So it becomes harder and harder exponentially. But there is one way to solve that a little bit. So if your damage is fine and you're mostly lacking defenses, there is this particular elixir here, the Iron Skin Elixir, that gives you 900 armor. And if you have one of those lying around, you can have a much easier time than you otherwise would. If you have seen my other video, the survival guide about defensive stats and how they will help you to survive in the later stages of the game, then you will know the value of armor. And before popping the elixir, I checked my armor contribution. I have 68% damage reduction to physical damage, and also half of the incoming damage will be also reduced by 68% because of the armor contribution. But when you pop the elixir, you will see that it massively increases. I go to 90% damage reduction from 68. And in fact, this is a tooltip bug. The cap is actually 85%. So I'm actually overcapped, which I should be because the monsters are massively higher level than me. So at level 62, the monsters are level 70. I will be unleveled by 8 levels. But this number that it shows on the tooltip here is for monsters of your own level. So of course, as you go to higher levels, you are expected to have more armor. And I don't actually have this 90%. But it's probably somewhere along the lines of like 80 or so, I would guess. I don't know the exact formula to calculate the exact armor value that you should have to reach a certain damage reduction value at any given level right now. But you remember I had a 68% damage reduction before the potion. And this means that, again, this would be a lower value against level 70 monsters. So let's say 55% or 50%, I don't know, something like that probably. So this means that we went from 50% damage taken to 20% damage taken. And the way that you have to calculate your overall toughness, your survivability, is that you divide 1 by this damage taken value. So in this case, 1 divided by 0.5, let's say, if we had 50% damage reduction from armor, we would have a value of 2, or like we had 200% of our base value as effective hit points. And if you do the same with 20% damage taken, well, we have 5 times the effective HP. So the difference here is that we are roughly 2.5 times tankier against physical damage, and also a lot of damage reduction comes to elemental damage. So the exact numbers in this case are a bit plus minus because I don't know the exact formula, but you can see that there is a massive improvement in your survivability just from this elixir alone. Now, unfortunately, the Iron Skin Elixir is an elixir that you cannot craft, you have to find it, so it can randomly drop. And maybe there are some quest rewards that would give it, I'm not sure about that. But usually I end up with a few of these in my pocket every time I level a character. I had this even on my first character, so I'm not sure exactly where they came from, but they seem to drop here and there as you go. And you can also get these drop-only elixirs, there are a few more than that, from Hell Tides. So for example, while farming in Nightmare difficulty, you could do some Hell Tides to acquire some of those elixirs. And then whenever you open, for example, the mysterious chest, you can maybe try to get one of them. Helltide is something you want to farm anyway, and especially in Nightmare difficulty, there's not really all too much other interesting stuff to do, because Nightmare Dungeon grind really pops off later in the game. So you can just do some Helltides whenever you see them, get a few of those elixirs, and they will massively help you with your survivability as you go to Torment difficulty the first time, especially when you're underleveled like this. And you see that even as a rogue with relatively low survivability tools, I am breezing through this dungeon. And even like, the elite hitting me here takes off like 10% of my life or something. I'm not scared at all of these level 70 monsters. And you see here that even Elias, who is like one of the first kind of tough boss fights in the game, I guess, doesn't really hurt me all that much. So even here I was really safe. I could probably even tank those fire cones if I wanted. and I would be totally fine because of this elixir. And you see here that even these bolts maybe take off like 20% of my HP or so, and well, I can just blast them down. If for some reason you are struggling with this boss fight, I'll give you a few tips here. So there are two main mechanics that you should pay attention to in my opinion. Number one are these fire bolts. So he summons them in different patterns. So one, they go behind him, and then after like 2 seconds or so they activate and they will fly towards you. So you see this here in action. They actually like can overlap and hit you all at the same time. And the best way to dodge them is to not do what I just did here with jumping in because I was greedy to DPS. But instead you should just like, walk backwards from them and then let them fan out so that you get hit maybe by one of them or just none at all, because it's much easier to dodge them at a longer distance. So this is a time to kind of like walk away and not do damage, and rather take the next damage window like now. He's just walking around, not doing anything, and you can just blast into his face. And then you have the second attack here. This is the cone. So right now he does a single cone. You can just evade behind him. But later in the fight, he also does multiple cones. So he will fill up one in front of him, and then he will also fill up another one, and then another one, so that the entire area is covered. But he does it in like a sequence. So you can basically just run behind him or evade behind him, and then go exactly where he started. You have to go to his first cone, because that area will already be cleared. So right now he doesn't cast the second one, but in the later stages he does. And now he would cast the second one, maybe where I'm standing, and I can just go to the first place, and this is how he dodged that one. He also does summon some other ground effects, for example here these circles, but I guess this is pretty self-explanatory. Don't stand in the fire. He has a few ads that you may want to deal with if it's a really long fight, but for the most part, if you have some kind of good boss damage, you shouldn't really have to worry about them. And they're also not really so impactful. And well, after Elias, this allows you to go to World Tier 4. A lot of people also ask me, should I go World Tier 4 after doing the Capstone Dungeon? And the answer is absolutely. So you have already finished the hard part. The Capstone Dungeon is the harder part of the progress, so to say. And now you can actually kind of like reap the spoils. So you go to the World Tier statue immediately, you change to World Tier 4. And from that point on, you can find Ancestral Items. And well, as long as you fight level 73 plus monsters somewhere in the open world content or so, you can quite easily get some huge upgrades here. The way that I usually go about this is that I focus on rather easy content. So for example, if this is your first character, you may want to finish your renown still. So maybe do some easy stuff like side quests, for example, try to get a bit of renown, get a bit of XP on the way. Just going to Torment Difficulty already gives you this massive boost in XP gain from monsters. But you can also just use this opportunity to try easy content that you have to do anyway. And for example here, I also like to do those local events when I'm fresh into Torment. It's relatively safe, they're usually not very hard, and you can just get a bunch of O-balls for free that I can use to maybe upgrade your gear as you go. And I kind of try to stay away from dungeons, because you might encounter Butcher, you generally have higher difficulty in dungeons, you generally have bosses that might be a struggle when you're under-leveled, because the single target damage might not be very great. So just do the stuff and try to get a few levels, and you'll notice that you'll level much faster despite not really following like the best, farming meta, so to say. Another thing I like to do when I'm fresh in Torment, especially on hardcore, is I just do some whispers. So they're usually not really the best thing to do in terms of like XP per hour or so, but again, fresh in Torment, you do benefit from this extra XP multiplier, and you can just get some rewards on the side. You can get some sigils, you can maybe find a nice legendary piece or two. So I just go around to, for example, these harvests or do the cellars and these kind of things. One other thing you can do fresh in Torment Difficulty is also strongholds. So they have a specialty here that they actually override the minimum level requirement of monsters. So when you go to Torment, everything will be at least 73, in Helltide even 75, but strongholds are always exactly +2 of your character, even if that's below 73. So if I go there at level 63, for example, the stronghold monsters will be level 65. Now, this doesn't actually help you much with the gearing, because strongholds generally almost drop no loot at all, and even if they would, you can't get ancestral pieces, because for that the monsters need to be 73, but you can get the XP multiplier. So if you still have any kind of strongholds left to do for your renown or for the waypoints to unlock and stuff like that, then this is also a really good time now. And basically, you just keep going like this. So you do easy stuff until you feel comfortable that you're strong enough to start doing dungeons and eventually nightmare dungeons. In Torment Difficulty is kind of the time to slowly get started with those. so that you can level up your glyphs. You get a nice power spike from leveling your glyphs to 15, and then you can even min-max them all the way up to level 21, where they get even more power. So for example, just fast forward here a little bit, like 3, 4, 5 levels or so. I kept doing these easy side outdoor activities, and now level 67, and I start doing dungeons, no problem, even though I'm still unleveled by 6 levels. Again, your mileage may vary a little bit depending on the build, depending on how tanky you are, how much damage you have, but even just a few levels can give you a massive power spike, especially once those ancestral drops are coming in. Once you get like a nice weapon upgrade, maybe get like a really big like defensive chest piece or something like that, you can really notice the difference quite soon with those extra levels. And again, this penalty that you have towards the monsters for being underleveled also decreases. So you might not really have to, chain pot iron skin elixirs just to survive in Torment anymore. Maybe you can use some other like fancier elixirs that you have lying around, instead of like the weak fire resistance elixir or something that does basically nothing. So maybe just use the better ones at that moment when you start doing some higher level stuff. And this is what they're there for. Generally, even if you are feeling really strong, I do not recommend to go to Torment difficulty before level 60, because ancestral pieces actually have a minimum level of level 60. So it doesn't really help you all that much to go there, besides getting this higher XP multiplier and maybe pre-farming a little bit of loot for level 60 to equip right away. But for the most part, these ancestral pieces do come in relatively fast, and most of the gear is still kind of like, in flux and getting like swapped out very frequently until it kind of stabilizes a little bit once you're like maybe around level 70 or so. As I mentioned at the start of the video, I do have my 1 to 100 progression guide, so if you want to learn more about the overall path and how to get there, then go check it out. And that's it for this video. So hope you enjoyed this, hope it helps you, and I'll see you guys next time.